I stood at the kitchen table holding my neatly typed 5-year savings plan. Daniel laughed, loud and dismissive, the sound echoing off the walls of our Denver home. His mother Carol sipped her wine from across the counter and said, "At your age, you should just be grateful he handles everything." I asked to see our retirement accounts. Daniel smirked, that condescending expression I had grown too familiar with over 27 years of marriage. "You wouldn't understand them," he said, waving his hand like I was a child asking about complicated adult matters. That was the moment I realized I didn't actually know what my own financial future looked like. I was 52 years old, had worked part-time at the public library for 15 years, and had no clear picture of where our money was or how secure we really were. My name is Patricia, and I'm from Boulder, Colorado. If you want to hear more stories about people who fought back and won, please subscribe to this channel. You won't regret it. That night, I checked the mail and found a credit card statement I had never seen before. The balance was in 5 figures. Designer purchases from stores I never shopped at. Resort charges from places I had never visited. The handwriting on the signature line wasn't mine. When I asked Daniel about it the next morning, he shrugged while pouring his coffee. "Business expenses," he said casually, not even looking at me. Carol, who had been staying with us for the past month, backed him up immediately. "Men have stress, Patricia. Don't nag him about every little thing." I smiled and dropped the subject, but inside, something cold and hard settled in my chest. It felt like ice forming over water, slowly covering everything beneath. I had spent decades trusting him completely, never questioning where money went or how decisions were made. That trust suddenly felt like the most foolish thing I had ever done. I called the bank the next morning, my hands shaking as I dialed. The representative was polite but firm when she delivered the news that made my stomach drop. I was only an authorized user on the account, not an owner. For 27 years, I thought our accounts meant shared security, a partnership built on mutual trust, and planning for our future together. Instead, everything was in Daniel's name. The checking account, the savings, the investment portfolios I thought we were building together. Even the house deed showed only his name as primary owner. My signature appeared on various documents I didn't remember signing, papers Daniel had put in front of me over the years saying they were just formalities or tax documents. I didn't confront him. Something told me that showing my hand too early would be a mistake. Instead, I took a long lunch break from the library and went to the county clerk's office downtown. The woman behind the desk helped me pull property records for our home on Maple Street, the house where I had raised our daughter and hosted countless family gatherings. The property records showed a line of credit taken against our home 6 months ago for $75,000. Daniel insisted it was temporary liquidity when I finally mentioned it casually over dinner that week. He explained it in that tone he used when talking to people he thought were stupid, slow, and patient, like he was teaching a difficult concept to someone who might not grasp it. Carol told me I was being paranoid, that successful men made financial moves I couldn't possibly understand with my limited experience. But I started digging anyway, quietly and carefully. I pulled my credit report at the library, using the computer in the back office during my break. My credit score had dropped significantly. There were accounts I never opened, cards I never applied for, purchases I never made. Someone had been using my identity systematically, and the only person with access to all my personal information was my husband. One charge stood out among all the others, appearing like clockwork every month for the past 8 months. Monthly payments to a luxury apartment complex called Riverside Towers, located across town near the business district. I sat in my car outside Riverside Towers on a Tuesday afternoon, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I was shaking not because I was shocked about what I might find, but because I was suddenly, strangely calm. The panic I expected never came. Instead, clarity washed over me like cold water. I walked into the leasing office and asked about units, pretending to be interested in renting. The manager, a cheerful woman named Brenda, talked enthusiastically about the amenities. When I asked about tenant references, she mentioned they were very selective. We have several professional tenants, including Mr. Daniel Cooper in Unit 412, she said proudly. My husband. Confirmed. I didn't go upstairs to confront him. I thanked Brenda and went home, stopping at an office supply store to buy a scanner and several flash drives. That night, Daniel announced he was restructuring investments and wanted me to sign new paperwork. He spread documents across the same kitchen table where he had mocked my savings plan. For the first time in our marriage, I said no. Just that simple word, spoken quietly but firmly. Daniel's expression shifted immediately. The charming smile vanished, replaced by something harder and colder. His tone changed too, no more condescending patience, just irritation barely controlled. This is important, Patricia. I need your signature tonight. Carol appeared from the living room, wine glass in hand as always, and called me ungrateful. After everything he's provided for you, this is how you act? You've never had to worry about money a day in your life. I quietly consulted a lawyer the next day, a woman named Angela Barrett whose office was in a small building downtown. She listened to my story without interruption, taking notes and nodding occasionally. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said something Daniel never expected anyone to figure out. The line of credit taken against your home without your explicit, informed consent may constitute financial fraud, especially if your signature was forged or obtained under false pretenses. I didn't explode. I didn't scream or throw things or make dramatic accusations. Instead, I began my own 5-year plan, the one Daniel had laughed at just weeks before. I took on extra hours at the library, working evenings and weekends when possible. The head librarian, a kind woman named Victoria, was happy to give me more responsibility and higher pay. I opened a retirement account in my own name at a different bank across town, one Daniel knew nothing about. I documented everything, taking photos of documents, saving statements, recording conversations when Colorado's one-party consent law allowed it. Daniel thought my silence meant surrender, that I had accepted my place and stopped asking difficult questions. He grew more relaxed, less careful about hiding things. Carol moved into the guest room permanently, claiming she was helping around the house, though mostly she just drank wine and made passive-aggressive comments about my cooking. A bank envelope arrived one morning, addressed to both of us, marked final notice in red letters. The investments Daniel had handled for years were failing catastrophically. Risky ventures in cryptocurrency and startup companies that folded within months. Bad loans to friends who never paid him back. He was scrambling, taking calls at odd hours and closing himself in the home office for entire evenings. Carol insisted it was temporary, just a rough patch that happened to all successful investors. But I discovered through careful investigation that he had used our home as collateral for a business venture tied to his apartment at Riverside Towers. The business was a consulting firm that existed mostly on paper, generating invoices but little actual revenue. I found paperwork hidden in his office showing partnership agreements and profit-sharing arrangements. The business partner's name was listed clearly on every document. The business partner was a woman named Stephanie, 15 years younger than Daniel, with an office in the same building as the apartment. I met her at a public fundraiser for the local arts council, an event I attended with several colleagues from the library. She was there with Daniel, though they arrived separately and pretended not to know each other well. She introduced herself to our group as Daniel's business associate, shaking hands and smiling with perfect white teeth. The way he looked at her confirmed everything I had suspected. His eyes followed her movements, his posture changed when she spoke, and he laughed at things she said that weren't particularly funny. He wasn't just being reckless with money. He was rebuilding an entire life without me, brick by brick, using funds he had taken from our shared future. The apartment, the business, the woman, it was all part of a plan he thought I was too stupid to notice. I learned through Angela that my name was still legally tied to the collapsing debts because of how our accounts were structured. My lawyer advised patience, counterintuitive as it seemed. If you file for divorce now, Angela explained, you inherit responsibility for half the mess he's created. The courts will see joint assets and joint debts. But if we wait and gather more proof of his sole responsibility and fraudulent activity, we can protect you. So I waited, continuing to gather evidence while Daniel grew increasingly irritable as the money dried up. He snapped at small things, complained constantly, and spent more time away from home. Carol moved into the guest room permanently now, claiming Daniel needed her support during difficult times. She took over parts of the house, rearranging furniture and making decisions about decor as if she owned the place. The tension was unbearable some days, but I stayed quiet and focused. One evening at dinner, Carol suggested selling the house quickly, before the market shifted. "Get out ahead of this," she said, looking at Daniel meaningfully. While organizing paperwork in the basement one Saturday afternoon, I found an old life insurance policy in a forgotten filing cabinet. Daniel had taken it out 20 years ago when our daughter was born, a whole life policy with substantial cash value. He had forgotten about it completely in his focus on riskier investments and newer schemes. The policy listed me as primary beneficiary, and more importantly, it required my consent for any loans or withdrawals against its value. For once, I held real leverage, something he needed that I controlled. The policy was worth enough to matter, enough to use as a bargaining chip if things got worse. I made copies and stored the originals in a safety deposit box I had rented at my new bank, the one Daniel didn't know about. 2 weeks later, the bank formally began foreclosure proceedings on our house. The notice was delivered by certified mail, requiring a signature. At a family dinner Carol insisted on hosting, Daniel snapped at me in front of everyone for not contributing financially to the household. Our daughter had come home for the weekend, bringing her new boyfriend to meet the family. The tension had been building all evening, with Daniel drinking too much and Carol making pointed comments about my part-time job. Something inside me finally broke through the careful control I had maintained for months. I calmly asked how a second apartment at Riverside Towers was contributing to our household finances. The table fell completely silent. Forks stopped moving. Carol's wine glass paused halfway to her mouth. Our daughter looked confused, glancing between her father and me. He didn't tell her everything, I realized. Carol looked genuinely stunned. After everyone left, Daniel privately begged me not to embarrass him further. His voice was different than I had ever heard it, smaller somehow, afraid. I filed for legal separation 2 days later, not divorce yet, just separation. Angela explained that this would freeze assets immediately and prevent Daniel from making any more large financial moves without court oversight. Daniel was furious when the papers were served at his office. He called me screaming, his voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Carol called me vindictive, cruel, and ungrateful, listing everything Daniel had supposedly done for me over the years. But the court ordered full financial disclosure from both parties. Every account, every asset, every debt had to be revealed and documented. Daniel would have to present his entire financial picture to a judge, including the things he had been hiding. The disclosures, when they finally arrived 3 weeks later, revealed far more debt than even I had expected, despite all my investigation. Hundreds of thousands of dollars gone, simply vanished into failed ventures and bad decisions. Retirement accounts drained to fund the consulting business that generated no profit. Loans stacked on loans, each one taken to pay off the previous one, a house of cards that was collapsing in slow motion. Daniel's confident facade had been hiding complete financial chaos. The man who insisted I couldn't understand money had destroyed everything through sheer incompetence and selfishness. But my quiet savings account, the one I had opened months ago at the bank across town, had grown steadily. Every extra shift at the library, every dollar I could save from the household money Daniel gave me, it all went into that account. The balance wasn't enormous, but it was real, and it was mine. The judge questioned Daniel's use of marital funds during a preliminary hearing, asking pointed questions about the apartment and the consulting business. Because of documented financial mismanagement and clear evidence of identity misuse, the court began leaning in my favor. The judge was a stern woman named Helen Rodriguez who had no patience for financial games. She asked Daniel directly about charges made using my identity, about signatures that didn't match, about decisions made without my knowledge or consent. He stumbled through answers that contradicted the evidence Angela presented. Daniel's consulting business collapsed publicly when major clients pulled out, spooked by the legal troubles and foreclosure notices. The younger woman, Stephanie, disappeared completely. She stopped returning his calls, closed the business office, and moved out of state according to mutual acquaintances. She had been interested in successful Daniel, not desperate Daniel. Carol realized, finally, that her own savings had been invested through Daniel's consulting firm. The money she thought was safe and growing was actually gone. Carol confronted him in our living room, her voice shaking with rage and betrayal. I listened from the kitchen as Daniel confessed he had used her retirement money too, promising returns that never materialized. She had given him nearly $50,000 over 2 years, trusting her son completely. Suddenly, I was no longer the villain in Carol's eyes. We weren't friends, but she stopped defending him quite so automatically. For the first time since I had known her, Carol looked small and frightened, an elderly woman who realized her financial security was gone. She had spent years telling me to trust Daniel, to be grateful, to stop asking questions. Now she understood why questions mattered. The house auction date was set for 6 weeks away. If someone didn't pay the overdue amount plus fees, the bank would sell our home to the highest bidder. I withdrew funds from my independent retirement account, the one I had been building slowly and carefully. It wasn't the full amount owed, but it was enough for a down payment and to negotiate with the bank. I presented certified funds at the foreclosure hearing, along with a proposed payment plan that Angela had helped me structure. Gasps rippled through the small courtroom. Daniel stared at me, his mouth literally hanging open in shock. Carol looked between us, confused about where the money had come from. The judge reviewed my proposal and asked about the source of funds. I explained my separate account, opened legally in my own name with money I had earned. The judge nodded approvingly and accepted the payment plan. I didn't buy the house jointly with Daniel. The new deed listed only my name. After 27 years of marriage, the house was finally, legally mine alone. I handed Daniel the finalized court documents across the same kitchen table where everything had started. Legal separation terms that protected my assets and income. Financial protection orders preventing him from using my identity or credit. Proof of asset recovery showing the house was secured in my name. He read through the pages slowly, his face growing paler with each paragraph. The house was secured, protected from his debts and his poor decisions. His name was not on the deed. Carol sat in the living room, pretending not to listen but hearing every word. The silence was heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, Daniel looked up at me and asked the question that seemed to genuinely confuse him. Where did you get the money? He had truly believed I was incapable of planning or saving, that I needed him to function financially. I placed my original 5-year savings plan on the table beside the legal documents. The plan was worn at the edges, coffee-stained, and marked with notes I had made over the months. But it was there, proof that I had thought about this carefully while he laughed. Every goal was checked off or updated. Every mock dollar had turned into real security. I had worked extra hours while he spent time at Riverside Towers. I had saved money while he drained accounts for failed businesses. I had planned while he assumed I was too stupid to notice what was happening. You laughed at this, I said quietly, tapping the paper. You told me I wouldn't understand finances. But I understood perfectly. I just didn't trust you anymore. Daniel read through my plan, seeing the calculations and projections that had actually worked. His face showed something I had never seen before, genuine fear about his future. He realized he had nowhere to go and no money to get there. Daniel asked to work it out over the following weeks. He called repeatedly, sent long emails explaining how we could rebuild together, suggested counseling and fresh starts. Carol asked to stay in the house, promising to pay rent and help with expenses now that she understood the real situation. I declined both requests calmly but firmly. For decades, I had asked for transparency, for partnership, for simple honesty about our finances. Daniel had laughed and dismissed me. Now I offered boundaries instead, clear and non-negotiable. Carol moved out to live with her sister in Arizona. She apologized before leaving, something I never expected. I should have listened, she said quietly, standing by her packed car. I taught him that women don't need to understand money. I was wrong. It didn't fix everything, but it was something. The divorce filing was prepared and ready to submit. Angela had everything documented perfectly. The courtroom was smaller than I expected for something so important. The judge reviewed everything methodically, taking her time with each piece of evidence Angela presented. Unauthorized debt taken in my name, hidden property and secret apartments, misused credit and forged signatures. The pattern was clear and damning. Daniel's attorney tried to argue that these were misunderstandings, that married couples often had complicated finances. Judge Rodriguez cut him off sharply. This isn't complicated finances, she said. This is fraud. The ruling granted me majority asset protection. I kept the house, my retirement accounts, and protection from his remaining debts. Daniel received his personal belongings and responsibility for debts he had created. The consulting business assets, worthless as they were, went to him as well. Daniel left the courthouse with far less than he had ever imagined possible when he started hiding money and making secret plans. Friends who had once believed Carol's narrative now saw the truth. Women from book club called to apologize for judging me, for thinking I was overreacting or being paranoid. The humiliation Daniel had tried to heap on me shifted direction, landing squarely on him instead. People talked about his situation in hushed, scandalized tones at the grocery store and the library. But the emotional weight of everything still lingered inside me. Anger and betrayal don't disappear just because you win in court. Some nights I lay awake replaying moments, wondering what I had missed or when things had started going wrong. I received an offer to move into a full-time administrative role at the library. Victoria wanted to promote me to assistant director, with better pay and benefits. It meant real financial security, a career path instead of just a job. I accepted immediately. With stability restored and genuine income, I renovated the house, slowly on my terms. No flashy upgrades or expensive contractors. Just security improvements like new locks and a better alarm system. I repainted rooms in colors I liked, not the neutral tones Daniel had insisted on. I turned his home office into a reading room with comfortable chairs and good lighting. For the first time in decades, the silence in the house felt peaceful instead of tense. I planted a garden in the backyard, something I had wanted for years, but Daniel said was too much work. I joined a hiking group and started taking weekend trips to the mountains with new friends. Life became smaller but fuller, focused on things that actually mattered. Daniel called again one evening, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. This time he was calling about bankruptcy. He asked if I would co-sign something, just temporarily, to help him get through the bankruptcy proceedings more smoothly. His voice sounded tired and defeated, nothing like the confident man who had dismissed my savings plan. It would really help me out, Patricia. For old time's sake. The request was so absurd I actually laughed, not cruelly, just knowingly. The same laugh he had given me when I suggested we plan our financial future together. No, I said simply. There was silence on the line. Then he tried again with different words, explaining why it made sense. I interrupted him. The answer is no, Daniel. It will always be no. I hung up without waiting for his response, without guilt or second thoughts. The chapter of my life that included him was completely closed. I felt nothing but relief. I sat at the same kitchen table where Daniel had once laughed at my careful planning. The folder with my 5-year savings plan was still there, worn at the edges and marked with years of updates and adjustments. The difference now was impossible to miss. The deed to the house sat in a fireproof safe in my bedroom, my name printed clearly as sole owner. The retirement accounts were healthy and growing, protected by beneficiary designations and legal structures. The security I had dreamed about was real and tangible, built through patient work while everyone told me I was being silly. I didn't scream or cheat or destroy Daniel through some elaborate revenge scheme. I simply prepared, quietly and carefully, while he assumed I was too stupid to notice what was happening. I documented everything and waited for the right moment to act. When the legal papers were finally placed in my hands, giving me control and protection, Daniel couldn't laugh anymore. The joke had been on him all along. He had underestimated the woman who spent 27 years watching, learning, and planning. That was his biggest mistake.